It is a Thursday afternoon, and you are standing in the office break room, waiting for the kettle. Two of your coworkers are leaning against the counter, planning where everyone is going. Friday night, someone mentions a bar downtown. Someone else laughs about how late they stayed out last week. They are not doing anything wrong. They are just being themselves on an ordinary Thursday. And somewhere inside you, almost without noticing, you take a small step backwards. Not physically. You are still standing in the same spot. You are still smiling. You might even be nodding along. But internally, something has shifted. A quiet half step away from the conversation. A subtle bracing. A faint awareness that you do not quite fit in this moment, and that maybe they can tell. Or maybe it is a different setting. You are at a family dinner. Cousins are talking about a show everyone watched. Someone quotes a line, and the whole table laughs. You did not see it. You were not going to see it. And in that small pause, you realize they are aware that you did not watch it. And you are aware that they are aware. And nobody says anything. But the moment lingers a beat too long. It is a strange feeling. It is not exactly pride. You are not standing there, feeling superior. It is not really conviction either. Not in the clean sense we sometimes describe conviction. It is more uncomfortable than that. More tangled. It is a low-grade social tension that follows you into ordinary places. The break room, the wedding reception, the team lunch, the neighborhood barbecue, the late-night conversation with old school friends. A quiet, almost invisible pressure that sits just under the surface of normal life. Most Adventists know this feeling. Many of us have known it since childhood. We just rarely talk about it. We talk about doctrine. We talk about Sabbath. We talk about standards. We talk about mission. But this particular feeling, this quiet awkwardness around people who live differently than we do, mostly stays unspoken. And it deserves an honest look, because something that shapes this much of our daily life is worth understanding, instead of just carrying. When you stop and really look at what is happening inside us in those moments, it is more layered than it first appears. You are at a work lunch. Someone asks what you did last weekend, and before the words come out, there is a small calculation running in your head. How much do I say? Do I mention church? Do I just say I had a quiet weekend? Will that sound boring? Will it sound evasive? You answer in about 3 seconds. But those 3 seconds carry a surprising amount of internal traffic. Or you are in a group conversation, and someone tells a joke. It is funny. You laugh. And then, half a second later, you wonder if you should have laughed that hard. You wonder if you looked too comfortable. You wonder if someone from church could have walked by and gotten the wrong impression. The joke is already over, and you are still thinking about your own reaction to it. There is also that other quieter thing. You notice how relaxed other people seem in their own skin. They do not appear to be monitoring themselves. They are not editing every sentence in advance. They are just being. And somewhere underneath the surface, there is a small ache, not envy of their choices, exactly. More like envy of their ease. And then there is the part most of us never say out loud. We carry a double fear. We are afraid of being judged in church if we seem too comfortable out there, too friendly with coworkers, too at ease with non-Adventist family, too able to navigate the world without flinching. And we are afraid of being misunderstood out there if we seem too different, too restrained, too careful, too obviously not part of the rhythm everyone else lives by. So we end up moving through life with one eye on each side, adjusting, softening, tightening, re-explaining ourselves in our own heads long after the conversation has ended. And there is a loneliness in that. A quiet sense that you do not fully belong on either side of the room, that the people inside church do not always see how hard ordinary life is, and the people outside church do not always understand why you live the way you do. Before we decide whether this tension is healthy or not, whether it is conviction or just exhaustion, we have to look at something more important. We have to look at how Scripture actually portrays faithful people moving through unfamiliar cultural spaces. Because the Bible is not silent on this, not at all. Let us slow down for a moment and open the book of Daniel together. For Adventists, Daniel has always been a kind of home base when we talk about being faithful in a worldly place. We grow up hearing about the food, the lions, the prayer window, and those stories are exactly right to focus on. But sometimes, when we read them quickly, we miss something about Daniel that is worth sitting with. Daniel is not nervous. In Daniel chapter 1, he and his friends are taken from Jerusalem and brought into Babylon. They are teenagers, probably, maybe 15 or 16 years old. And the Babylonian system does not just put them in a separate room and leave them alone. It sets out to remake them. Their names are changed. Their education is changed. They are given Babylonian literature to study. They are immersed in the language, the culture, the worldview, the religion of the empire. This was not a neutral environment. Babylon was actively reshaping who they were supposed to be. And yet Daniel learns. He studies. He becomes good at what they teach him. He works alongside officials who worship other gods. He serves a king who does not share his faith. He builds genuine, working relationships with people in that palace. When he draws a line on the food, he does it respectfully. He talks to the official in charge. He proposes a test. He does not lecture anyone. He does not make a scene. He is firm and quiet at the same time. And later, in Daniel chapter 6, when there is a decree that he is not supposed to pray, he simply goes home, opens his window toward Jerusalem, and prays the way he always has. There is no panic, no performance, just a man continuing what he has always done. Notice what is missing in these stories. There is no visible social anxiety. There is no sense of Daniel scanning every room for compromise. He is not bracing himself every time he walks past a Babylonian colleague. He works with them. He eats with them, within his convictions. He earns their respect. He is integrated without being absorbed. That phrase is worth holding on to for a minute. Integrated, but not absorbed. Present in Babylon, but shaped by Jerusalem. Daniel gives us the Old Testament picture of what this kind of faithful, calm presence can look like. But there is someone else who walks through this question in an even more striking way. And we have to look at him next. Now let us turn to Jesus, because what we see in him is striking. In Luke chapter 5, Jesus calls Levi a tax collector. Tax collectors in that society were not just unpopular. They were considered traitors. They worked for Rome. They overcharged their own people. They were often grouped with sinners and outsiders in the way respectable religious people talked. And Levi, the moment he follows Jesus, throws a great banquet. He invites his friends, his old work crew, other tax collectors, the kind of people the local religious teachers would never sit with, and Jesus goes. He sits at that table. He eats with them. He talks with them. The Pharisees see this and immediately complain. They cannot understand why a teacher would lower himself like that. And Jesus simply says, "The ones who are well do not need a doctor. He is doing what he came to do." In Luke chapter 7, the scene is different, but the pattern continues. Jesus is at a meal in the house of Simon the Pharisee, and a woman, known in the town as a sinner, walks in, weeps at his feet, and washes them with her tears. The whole room is uncomfortable. Simon is silently judging, and Jesus, completely at ease, defends her and forgives her right there in front of everyone. In John chapter 2, he is at a wedding in Cana. Ordinary celebration. Family, friends, food, wine, and he is simply there. He is not standing in a corner trying to look set apart. He is part of the day. His critics noticed. In Matthew chapter 11, they accuse him of being a friend of sinners. They mean it as an insult. He never denies it. If you watch the pattern across these stories, something quietly remarkable shows up. People who were nothing like Jesus felt comfortable being near him. Sinners, outsiders, ordinary folks at weddings, tax collectors, women that respectable society avoided. They wanted to be in the same room as him. They told him real things. And yet he was never absorbed by their values. He did not drift. He did not soften the truth. He simply was who he was in their company. In John chapter 17, when he prays for his disciples before going to the cross, he does not ask the Father to take them out of the world. He asks the Father to keep them, to protect them, to make them holy, while they continue to live in the world. He even adds that he is sending them into it the same way he was sent. That prayer is worth sitting with, because most of us would have prayed the opposite prayer. And once you sit with the way Daniel and Jesus actually moved through unfamiliar rooms, something honest starts to surface in us. Because if we look closely at our own lives, some of what we have been calling spiritual separation might be something else entirely. A coworker invites you to a group dinner. Nothing strange about the dinner. Just food, people, conversation. And you decline. You tell yourself it is because of your convictions. But if you are honest, late that evening, you know the real reason was simpler. You did not know how to be yourself in that room. You did not want to spend the whole night managing your own reactions. So you said no, and you called it faithfulness. Or you are in a conversation at work, and the topic drifts somewhere you have opinions about. And you stay quiet. You tell yourself you are being wise. You tell yourself you are choosing your words carefully. But somewhere underneath, you know it was not wisdom. You were just afraid of saying the wrong thing, afraid of being remembered as the religious one, afraid of being remembered as not religious enough. So silence felt safer than presence. Or there is a friendship that slowly fades. Someone outside the church. Someone you actually liked. And when the texts stop, when the invitations stop, there is a quiet relief inside you. Because it was exhausting. Not because they were a bad influence. Not because they were dragging you down. But because being around them required constant internal effort. And you are tired. These are the moments worth being honest about. Some of what we have called holiness has actually been social avoidance. Some of what we have called wisdom has been fear of being misunderstood. Some of what we have called separation from the world has been quiet exhaustion from never feeling settled anywhere. This does not mean our convictions are wrong. They are not. The Sabbath is still the Sabbath. Truth is still truth. The way we live still matters. But the inner posture we carry can drift, without us noticing. We can start to confuse spiritual identity with social withdrawal. We can start to confuse faithfulness with tension, and we can spend years in a kind of low-level emotional fatigue, thinking that fatigue is the cost of following Jesus, when actually it is the cost of monitoring ourselves every minute we are around people who are not like us. Jesus did not live with that fatigue. Daniel did not live with that fatigue. And Scripture, when you read it carefully, actually reframes what being set apart was always supposed to mean. When the Bible talks about being set apart, it is almost always describing something internal. Something about who we belong to. Something about what is shaping us from the inside. It is rarely measuring physical or social distance from other people. Paul makes this remarkably clear in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. He had written to the believers in Corinth, telling them not to associate with sexually immoral people. And apparently some of them had taken that to mean they should cut off all contact with anyone outside the church. So Paul writes back to clarify. He says, "I did not mean the people of this world. If you tried to avoid them entirely, you would have to leave the world altogether." Read that slowly. Paul is saying that following Jesus was never meant to require an exit from ordinary human society. The faithful life happens inside the world, alongside coworkers and neighbors and family members who do not share our faith. That was always the assumption. Being set apart in Scripture has to do with whose voice you listen to. What shapes your conscience? What you obey? What you love? Who you worship? Who you belong to? It has very little to do with how socially distant you keep yourself from ordinary humans. For Adventists, this matters in a specific way. The remnant identity in our tradition has always been understood as faithfulness to truth. The Sabbath, the commandments, the testimony of Jesus. A people who hold on to what others have let slip. That is the language of revelation, and it is the language of our heritage. But that calling was never described as emotional distance from ordinary people. Nowhere in Scripture is the remnant pictured as anxious or socially withdrawn. They are described as faithful, as steady, as keeping the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. A people you can recognize because of what they hold on to, not because of how far back they stand in a room. A healthy Adventist identity should actually make us more grounded around people, not more nervous. The deeper we are rooted in who God says we are, the less we should need other people's approval, and the less we should need other people's distance. There is a quiet truth in the great controversy framework that fits here too. The enemy benefits enormously when faithful people become socially paralyzed, because a paralyzed Christian cannot represent Christ to anyone. A nervous, withdrawn believer becomes invisible to the very people God wanted to reach through them. That is not a small loss. So if the goal was never distance, what was actually supposed to hold us steady inside ordinary rooms? Scripture points us to something deeper, something that explains how Daniel stayed calm in Babylon, and how Jesus stayed at ease at Levi's table. The reason Daniel was calm in Babylon was not because Daniel was naturally calm. The reason Jesus was at ease at Levi's table was not because Jesus had unusually strong social skills. Something else was holding both of them. Daniel in chapter 6, when the decree against prayer goes out, simply goes home. He opens the window toward Jerusalem, and he kneels down and prays 3 times that day, the way he had always done. The text tells us this. He did not start praying because of the crisis. He had been praying like that for years. The window was already open. The rhythm was already there. That rhythm is what made him steady. In the Gospels, you see the same pattern in Jesus. Mark chapter 1 tells us that very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place to pray. Luke chapter 5 says he often withdrew to lonely places to pray. Not occasionally, often. The crowds were intense. The demands were constant. People wanted things from him every hour of the day, and he kept slipping away, again and again, into time with the Father. That is where the calm came from. When your identity is steadily formed in communion with God, something shifts inside you. You stop needing other people's approval to feel safe. You stop needing distance from other people to feel holy. You can walk into a room of strangers, or a room of relatives, or a break room full of coworkers without bracing. Not because you are unaffected by them, but because something deeper than them is already holding you. This is one of the quiet gifts of the Adventist understanding of Christ's ministry. We have always taught that Jesus did not finish his work at the cross and walk away. He is still active, still ministering, still interceding for his people in the heavenly sanctuary right now as you listen to this. That matters here, because the one who walked through Levi's house and through Simon the Pharisee's dining room and through the wedding in Cana knows exactly what it feels like to be a faithful presence in an unfamiliar room. He carried that on earth, and he is praying for you as you try to carry it now. You are not alone in the break room. You are not alone at the family dinner. There is someone who has lived this and who is interceding for you as you live it. The calm does not come from better social strategies. It does not come from finally learning the right thing to say. It comes from abiding, quiet, daily, ongoing communion with the one who already understands. So what does that look like on a Monday morning, when you actually have to walk back into all of it? So what does this look like, practically, this week? A few things worth trying. Stop rehearsing conversations in your head before they happen. You know the habit. Driving to work, mentally drafting answers to questions no one has asked yet. Pre-writing what you will say if someone brings up the weekend. A settled heart does not need a script. When the moment comes, you will speak. And it will be more natural than anything you could have planned. Stop scanning every social interaction for compromise threats. Most ordinary moments are just ordinary moments. A coworker telling a funny story is just a coworker telling a funny story. A neighbor inviting you to a backyard cookout is just a neighbor being a neighbor. Not every conversation is a spiritual test you might fail. Practice being genuinely curious about the people around you. Not as a strategy, just as a way of being human with them. Ask real questions. Remember the name of their kid. Remember the surgery their mom had last month. Show up consistently. Most of the people in our daily lives are quietly carrying things they rarely get to talk about. You being calmly present is already meaningful. Learn to notice the difference between actual conviction and social anxiety, wearing spiritual clothes. They feel similar from the inside, but they are not the same. Conviction is steady and clear. Anxiety is restless and self-protective. Conviction says, I cannot do this particular thing. Anxiety says, I am afraid to be in this room at all. These need different responses. Honor the first. Do not let the second control your life. Be honest in church spaces too. Stop performing spiritual confidence you do not actually have, and stop pretending that life outside the church is easier than it is. The people you sit next to on Sabbath are tired of performance. Most of them would breathe easier if you went first. Peter writes in his first letter, chapter 3, that we should always be ready to give a reason for the hope that is in us, but with gentleness and respect. That is not a courtroom posture. It is a kitchen table posture. It assumes that someone asked casually, in the middle of an ordinary conversation, and you simply told them the truth about your life. Quietly, without bracing. None of this requires a personality change. It is just a small reorientation. Less monitoring, more presence. Less rehearsing, more trusting. Less performing on both sides of the room. And maybe, before we close, there is one more thing worth saying. Go back for a moment to that break room. The kettle is still warming up. The coworkers are still planning their Friday night. You are still standing there. But maybe, just maybe, you do not have to take that small step backwards anymore. You can simply be present. Smile at the joke. Ask about their week. Listen to the story about their kid. You are allowed to be a human being in that room, fully and warmly, while still belonging entirely to God. That was always what we were called to. The Adventist calling has never been a calling into social fear. It has always been a calling into a kind of grounded, peaceful faithfulness that the people around us can actually feel. The kind Daniel carried at Babylonian tables. The kind Jesus carried into every room he ever entered. The kind that does not need to perform anything to anyone. Being different was supposed to look like being steady. A quiet, settled, lived-in faithfulness that does not announce itself, but does not hide either. Maybe this week, the most faithful thing is simpler than you thought. Maybe it is not declining the lunch invitation. Maybe it is going, showing up, being yourself, listening well, asking real questions, trusting that the God who has been with you in church is just as present at the table with your coworkers. He is not waiting at the church door for you to return. He is walking in with you on Monday morning into every room you enter this week. You were never meant to live afraid of ordinary people. You were meant to live held, and from that place, to bring something into ordinary rooms that those rooms are quietly longing for, even when they do not know how to name it. May your week be a little less rehearsed and a little more present. May the calm of Christ go with you into every conversation, and may the people around you sense, in some small way, that you are carrying something steady, something they can trust, something real.